This is just dumb, and we all know it's dumb, and everybody involved knows it's dumb, and the lawmakers involved know that this isn't how the system should work, and it doesn't have to work this way. Elected politicians have made a choice to have extra moments of drama where there shouldn't be any. And as taxpayers, I don't even understand how this is legal. I understand there was a legal interpretation of how annual funding works, that all of this has sort of created this idea that somehow funding stops on September 30th and a government agency ceases to function. It is ridiculous for the world's supposedly number one superpower to behave this way. And the fact that we're going to have air traffic controllers, we expect them to come to work and just be on promised back pay, right? That's the part of this shutdown that is probably going to speed things up. And if you recall, and in fact, the fastest way this shutdown ends is probably if we have a repeat of what happened during the 2018 shutdown, because and it was my friends at Politico pointed this out earlier on Wednesday. During that 35-day 2019 shutdown, 2018 through 2019, there were a record number of TSA agents who called out sick. And it was over Martin Luther King weekend that you saw the surge. You had 10% of airport screeners missing work. You had 10 air traffic controllers had to temporarily shut down. They shut down LaGuardia Airport because they were missing so many air traffic controllers. Because basically, once you hit a certain point in the shutdown, you've like literally missed paychecks. Yes, you're going to get the back pay, but do you know who doesn't take an IOU? Your bank. Okay, when you pay your mortgage, the electric company doesn't take the IOU. No, I've got the pay. It's coming. But can you wait? You go ahead and try it, right? We all know that doesn't work that way. And then, so the one way, right? The entity that has the most leverage to force everybody to just reopen the government quickly would actually be TSA agents and air traffic controllers. That was the one thing that did it the last time, because essentially they didn't want to have to, risk doing their job without getting paid and all that stuff. So they had sick days. They called in sick. All right, I'm not, doing it this way. That's what arguably forced some action the last time. So if you're looking for an outside way that you would force a quick sit down, there's that. What we've seen over the last 24 hours is I actually think, I know on Wednesday I said, I don't know how this ends. It's not an obvious exit ramp. I actually think you're starting to see, I think this is more likely this ends by the end of next week. I will be shocked if we go into a second weekend of this government shutdown. First of all, there's already 3 Democrats who are willing to vote for the clean CR. You saw that with Angus King, Catherine Cortez Masto, and Fetterman. So that's 3. In theory, you just need 4 more. Well, who's sitting out there? The Senate retirees. Jeanne Shaheen out of New Hampshire, Gary Peters out of Michigan, Tina Smith out of Minnesota, Dick Durbin out of Illinois, right? Those, don't have to worry about the voters, don't have to worry about a progressive base. They're done with politics. So, that's the next 4 who could essentially. Now, Durbin sort of quasi-member, I say quasi-member of leadership, but it's always been the Schumer show. Durbin really doesn't have the same amount of influence that maybe he should have, but he doesn't, and hasn't with Schumer there. So the fact that there are already 3, when Angus King and Cortez Masto, they already knew Fetterman was going to get there. So you have that. I think the fact that the vice president, J.D. Vance, a very significant thing that he threw out there, he said, I'm more than willing to negotiate over these Obamacare subsidies. I think that we should talk about it, but I don't want to negotiate until we reopen the government. I've seen this movie before when the shoes were on the other foot, where Democrats concede to a point that the Republicans wanted, but said, we're not going to negotiate until you agree to reopen the government. Essentially, in hostage negotiations, we'll negotiate to a point, but we're not going to consider, until you release somebody or till you release something. In this case, the releasing is the votes on the government. There's a reason results matter more than promises. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan has become America's largest injury law firm. For the last 35 years, they've recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. It includes cases where insurance companies offered next to nothing, sort of shortchanging, seeing if they could get away with it. And Morgan & Morgan fought back, and they won millions. In Pennsylvania, one client was awarded $26 million. It was a staggering 40 times the amount that the insurance company originally offered. That offer, $650,000, whatever it took to sort of get away without paying. So with more than 1,000 lawyers across the country, Morgan & Morgan knows how to deliver for everyday people. So if you're injured, you're looking for a lawyer, check out forthepeople.com/ToddCast or dial pound law, pound 529 on your cell phone. And remember, all law firms are not the same. So give Morgan & Morgan a look. Their fee is free unless they win. My point is that while yesterday it was hard to envision what the exit ramp looks like, it actually is pretty easy. You're going to go through the weekend. It's going to make everybody, perhaps those that wanted this fight now, maybe it makes them feel better. The one upside I think Democrats can already say that they've gotten out of this is that they've elevated this healthcare issue, which had not gotten any traction in sort of the free media space, right? It hadn't really been able to break through. It's very hard for any subject to break through most days in Washington in the Trump era. This one had had a hard time breaking through. So if you want to make yourself feel better on the left, that this has been, that there's a dividend that might come from this, that's the one obvious dividend. But I want to associate myself with something Matt Iglesias wrote today in his Substack, and I thought it was a really good. First of all, he was associated himself with an argument that Brian Butler was making, which is that what this showdown should be about between the two parties is the fact that Republicans are not taking the idea of recissions, the sort of taking back spending, essentially just clawing back money that was agreed to in the budget. It takes 60 votes to get the budget passed, but it only takes 50 votes on a party line vote, thanks to new rules changes by John Thune, to rescind some spending. So in theory, right, Republicans can agree to some Democratic demands and then go back and on a party line vote, essentially welch on the deal. And what Butler and Iglesias are arguing is like, that is a reason to say, no, we don't trust you to negotiate fairly, since, you want our votes for 60 today and then you cut us short here. Essentially, they're of the mindset, and Iglesias has always been a proponent of getting rid of the filibuster. And I was telling you yesterday that, one of the interesting unintended consequences of this could be, because if Republicans really want to open the government today, they can open the government right now. They can open the government yesterday. All they have to do is get rid of the filibuster. And then they only need 50 votes. And that would be a fascinating development. Suddenly you wouldn't have a filibuster, and the Senate would be working on a 50 vote. And there's certainly plenty of folks on the left who would like to see that. And there are proponents of getting rid of the filibuster on the right. Living in this polarized world, the ability to get 60 votes these days is very difficult. Now, someone like me thinks acts of Congress, actually, the passage, it should be hard. And it should be, it should be 65 votes. And I argue in judges, it should be 75 votes. And why do I argue on judges that it should be 75 votes? Because then you have to nominate people that have to get at least 25 votes from the other side, which means you're going to have more neutral arbiters. You're going to have more umpire-like judges rather than ideologue-like judges in that. So whatever you do with the vote, right, you become what the vote will allow in this case, right? So I think it's an interesting scenario that we could see happen. But the bottom line is, when you start to sort of read these tea leaves, you've got J.D. Vance already publicly agreeing to negotiate on the Obamacare subsidies, which to me means you technically got what you wanted, right? If the whole point was to get that on the table. Now, right now, the Schumer ask is for these subsidies to be included in whatever agreement is there to essentially open up the government for the next 6 weeks through November. But I could argue that by Vance agreeing to that, well, okay, and you kind of have a safety net here. And this goes back to the tactical decision to sort of make this the make your shutdown demands happen now, or take the 6 weeks, which I think was a gift. And then you sort of have your showdown over healthcare subsidies in November.